Welcome to the Live Compelled podcast. We are recording this live in the wood carving studio in downtown Temperance, where Pastor Dustin Reed, my incredible, great youth pastor and neighbor, grew up literally right downtown Temperance.
About 30 feet away.
Yeah. You were 8 or 9 when I moved here.
8 or 9, and I have a lot of memories of this place even before you guys, because we were very close to the previous owners, the Krupas. Yeah. We had an army club. I remember your basement before you even moved in. We had a fort in the backyard. It was crazy. It was a lot of good times.
Life was good.
Life was good, simple.
And I moved in and you didn't talk to me for like 10 years.
Yeah, I was not the most conversational child.
But you were always busy playing baseball with no shoes or shirt on.
Yeah, baseball all winter, all summer. That's all we did.
Be like 6 a.m. I could hear you guys hitting balls. I'm like, those kids are crazy.
I mean, we had nothing to do. It was the late 90s. So we didn't have any phones to play with.
No Xbox, no iPhones, nothing.
Still Nintendo and Sega. So.
Just had a ball and a bat. And parents are like, go outside and play.
Make some dreams out there. It's good times. Well,
Dusty Reed is now Compelled has been your church home for a very long time, and you have been our youth pastor for a very long time. Before that, you were like an assistant to Pastor Tom. Give us a little bio, Dusty, so our listeners can know who is this Dusty Reed they hear so much about.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Temperance, so right here in T-Town, as Pastor Nate's already stated. My family was, when Compelled kind of was launched, we were actually in the process of trying to find a church way back when back in 96. And so we kind of got linked up with Compelled then. So we started attending in that first year. But I'm from a family of 12, so I have 11 brothers and sisters. So a lot of chaos ensued at our house all the time. So.
Do you know how great it was when you guys came and doubled our Sunday morning attendance? I couldn't wait to send my report in for that month.
ACMR is probly,
wow, man.
Jeez.
One of the fastest growing churches in America.
We're going to be on a magazine. It's going to be awesome.
Grew from 25 to 47, 48.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
That's good, yeah. It was always kind of interesting growing up with a family that big. Like, it's just kind of normal for me. And so people always ask me about that, how that went. And it was always something going on. Now, coming back to the house, all my siblings have children. And so I'm actually getting a nice taste of what my parents experienced by just the noise. And I'm not used to that anymore. I mean, I just live with my wife and a cat. And so we don't make noise like that. And so going to the Reed Ranch now is kind of crazy. It's fun. But growing up in that was always interesting and great. My parents were Christians, so they always gave us, just put us really in a good place to hear about Christ, from, making it a priority to going to church. But for me, I definitely struggled early on with just this concept of just Jesus and who he was. He seemed very historic to me. And I thought he was real, all those things. But I think it was through a series of events and years and just faithfulness of my parents and just the pastors that Compelled, you, Pastor Nate, and Pastor Rick, just really being consistent in my life and just really showing me who Christ was just through the way that you guys lived. But I didn't really sense a shift in my life, I would say, until I was about 17, when I really felt like it was my faith. We went to a summer camp that summer, the camp that we still go to today, Camp Fahola. And I just recall this shift where it really just felt real to me, where Jesus kind of just stopped being this historic figure, but rather my Savior, someone who really cared and loved me and, chose me to just be is, a follower of his. And just that's when it really started for me, I would say, as far as my faith background. But I'm thankful that, I had those years prior, for sure. Like, they were all building blocks, I believe. And then I was baptized that next summer. And, since then, I've just really had such a blessed life because of that decision and allowing Christ to be the leader of my life. And I'm very thankful for, my parents, who are always so faithful and putting me in a position to really receive, their generational faith by just being faithful in that process. But it's been quite a journey since then as well.
I remember when we started the church and you guys started attending, people in town would ask me, like, are you the church the Reeds go to? Is Mike Reed go to your church? I mean, people knew Mike and Kathy way before they knew anything about Nate and Wendy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it was the best marketing ever to have the Reeds going to your church because the whole town knows you guys.
Yeah, so my parents both grew up here, both Bedford graduates, and so I'll go places and we have a very distinct look, so I'll get, are you a Reed? And then I have to, Reed? Yeah. Then they'll have me rattle off the order and where I'm at in the order and what everyone's doing. So definitely a name here in Bedford, but for good reasons, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, it was so nice. I'm loud, so I was a loud father, and my kids are loud, and we're a loud family. And sometimes I'd yell at the kids, and then I'd feel bad, like I think the Reeds heard me. And I asked Mike, and he's like, "No, we can't hear anything above our own yelling." So I was like, "That's awesome."
It's crazy there. It's so loud, but in all the good ways, just fun, a lot of laughter.
I think of the Reed legacy of faith at Bedford, and not just of faith, but of their faith in Christ. Mm-hmm. Last week, I was standing on the front row and I was watching your dad help lead worship with his granddaughter. Mm-hmm. What an incredible blessing. I said to Mike, I'm like, man, leading worship with your granddaughter. He was so overjoyed.
Yeah.
Your sister works full time with us, Allie. She's been with us over 15 years. Mm-hmm. Now your wife is not only your assistant, but our front office manager.
Yeah.
And your niece cleans and Mandy has been active for 28 years, helping lead worship and girls ministry. Like, go right down the line.
Yeah.
Mike is helping.
Yeah.
Everybody's jumped in.
Yeah. Parents always modeled just that servant's heart that, it's about what we can give, and you receive so much more when you're willing to just give just out of the abundance of just love that Christ has given you. And so I know I saw that my whole life. And so even before maybe I was fully committed, I just knew it was a priority, and it always made me feel good to give and just to be there and to be a help to people.
Right. So, why don't you just let everybody know, like, how did you get to being the youth pastor at Compelled Church? You found Christ.
Yeah.
You jumped into back then we had a master's commission. You got some education. You got your license. I know you youth pastored a little bit, but
so it's kind of a crazy story in many ways, but a story that I'm very thankful for. And I would say, I like many teenagers, and that's why I think I just love working with teenagers so much. Was very confused on what I was supposed to do with my life. I always, wondered, what is my life going to become? I probably, like many of them and like many adults, overvalued that to my identity, but it was definitely a very big decision that I knew that I had to kind of figure out. And so I decided that I was going to head into broadcasting my senior year, which is stuff I still get to do and love to do, from video editing to producing things and making things. But something wasn't sitting right with that decision, especially towards the end after I had already made that decision. So it's the summer heading into my first year of college. And it's just one of those moments in time that will never really leave me. I was seeing a movie. It was Star Wars Revenge of the Sith.
Good movie.
It was actually the only good movie of that series of 3 they made in the early 2000s. I
agree.
And I had just this uneasiness in me during the trailers. And I kind of just felt God tell me in his own still voice in my heart to decide to drop out of broadcasting school and then actually enter in to our ministry school at the time, the Master's Commission. And it was very scary, and I was very unsure about that decision. It just didn't really make sense. Like, I had put so much effort and time into learning how to be a broadcaster, and I thought that was really the path that I should take. And I kind of just, had that happen. It was as if a ton of bricks was just dropped on me. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I had this decision. I remember I was watching that movie with my friend Josh, and I told him, and he just encouraged me to go talk to my youth pastor, so Pastor Rick. And then from that conversation, I dropped out of broadcasting school, told my parents. It was the scariest conversation I've ever had. And of course, my mom and dad said, we knew you were going to talk to us about this. So it was something that God had already kind of prompted in them, that they knew the conversation was going to happen, that I was going to kind of figure it out. And so that's where the pursuit of ministry started. And I think during those few years in ministry school at Compelled, God really just put on my heart to just be this type of servant and be the individual that my pastors were to me, to the next generation. And so from that moment, I got it, just knew I was probably going to be working with students. And I just kind of, just trusted God in that and allowed just the wisdom of you and Pastor Rick to kind of just be something that I really gleaned from. And from that moment, I actually accepted a job in Grand Haven up in Gateway. I spent a year there, and it was a great blessing to me. And I came back home. I felt called to come back to Temperance and just kind of serve as a volunteer. And so this was back in 2008, I believe. And so Pastor Tom was then the youth pastor. And I started serving in a volunteer role because I just loved volunteering. I still do to this day. And I started working full time at the old Kroger, which was a fun experience. I definitely enjoyed that.
Love me some Kroger.
Stocking those shelves, getting asked fun questions about what I was stocking. I mean, good times. But a few years into that, my sister, Allie, who was Pastor Tom's assistant at that time, decided to go to Uganda on a missions trip.
I remember.
Yeah. Yep. It was probably scary for the church for a little bit. Yeah. It's always scary when people go,
what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? Is she going to stay in Uganda? Yeah. And so I actually had a conversation with Pastor Tom. I'm like, hey, I was willing to kind of fill in during those 3 months as his admin, because that was her kind of main role. And it really, in my heart, I did not envision it going beyond those 3 months. I just had a little margin. I could cut back some hours at work before I kind of made a decision for my future. And, the church said yes to that. And then kind of fast forward today, and now I'm in my role. I kind of just never left. And so from that moment, after the 3 months, they kind of shifted some stuff around. I became Pastor Tom's assistant. And and then I just think through prayer and just through me really being willing to trust God, because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to kind of jump back in. Like, I really did enjoy just volunteering, and I still do. But just through God and God leading you guys as well as my heart, it just, in many ways, kind of just happened.
Yeah. How many years did you serve Tom?
Oh, man.
3, 4?
So I was a volunteer with him for 3 years, and then I started working at the church in 12. So 1 year there, and then 2 years as like the assistant youth pastor role.
So Tom came to me and he said he felt the Lord was leading him to look for a lead pastor position. And I'm not from the generation older that would be like, well, you're disloyal then. If you don't want to be here, you're fired. I just think that's so stupid and so little. Yeah. But that's the way they did things in the day. That's not the way we do things. And I said, well, let's pray about it. Let's begin to get ready for a transition plan, because I wanted God's will for Tom's life and his family. I mean, they were such a blessing. They were here 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my kid's youth pastor. I mean, your youth pastor. Yeah. They were awesome. And so we just prayed, and I said, start merging Dusty in, use him. And he just started using you more and seeing you more. And so when Tom actually went to Wooster, Ohio, and turned that church around, that was a revitalization. It was seamless. You guys, it was a seamless transition.
Yeah. I mean, I really appreciate Pastor Tom and Jen. Like, he really instilled in me just a desire to want to be a youth pastor. You know, it was such an amazing experience and a healthy one for me. And just a great leader and a great man and a great friend.
Tom and Jen are just, I still miss him.
Oh yeah, me too.
Always glad when I hear from him. And if he's listening, I don't hear from him enough, FYI. But
called him out.
I love that guy. And so you've been the youth pastor here for how many years?
So eight and a half years since Tom left.
So this is your 9th year?
Yeah, 9th year. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I'm just going to be honest with the parents that are listening. If you're not making sure your student is not at youth group, you owe them an apology for the rest of their life. Because Dusty and Michelle disciple and have an incredible youth ministry. It's community, it's teaching, it's thoughtful, it's fun, it's making disciples. Yeah. And you guys do an incredible job.
Thank you.
Opening your home, opening your hearts. Yeah. Sometimes I worry you guys are too busy.
Yeah. I think you do a great job, discipling, coaching us in that as well. And just to remind us to, make sure to create that space. And so we appreciate that in the heart of our church to stay healthy and spiritually healthy and physically healthy and all those things.
Looking forward to in the future here when you get a sabbatical.
Yeah.
It's going to be different and fun.
It's going to be very fun. Scary. I'd say scary.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to it just to get rest and just really seek God's, he obviously just to renew a passion in me, but beyond just a role, but just to help me focus in on what's really important, and that's just knowing him and being with him. And so I get that, but just really getting away to do that, I feel so blessed that's even an option,
Yeah. Yeah, well, you sure deserve it. And I know when I had my sabbatical, I've always been identified my whole, 28 years with the pastor at Compelled Church. And then when I said, I'm not the pastor anymore, for 2 months, I wasn't the pastor. I was just the son of God.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. Not the son of God,
no,
a son of God.
That's a different kind of, gotta watch out for that.
It's awesome. Just being a Christian. Just loving God, not worrying about any decisions to be made except, what I'm going to eat and where we're going to travel and what I'm going to read is pretty great. So is there anything in your life, Pastor Dusty, a revelation or discovery the Lord's given you that still has impacted you even to this day? Yeah. Something you can kind of put your finger on to say, man, that was a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah, I think I've had, obviously when you kind of like search your heart and look back in your stories, there's probably multiple things that I could, share. But there's this one, and it's really odd in some ways. I remember about 4 years back, I was reading the letter of Philemon, which is a strange one to get revelation from, I understand. And we don't need to go into a whole introduction or a long introduction about it. But essentially, Philemon is a slave owner to Onesimus, and Paul's penning this letter to Philemon. And for whatever reason, there is a line in there, a few lines, I think it's verse 18 through 20. And it kind of just shook up the way that I saw people and the way that I would minister to people. Because in that letter, we don't know much about exactly what Onesimus did. We just know that he was in conflict with Philemon and he left him. So he, kind of got away from that relationship. And then he does ministry with Paul. And then Paul starts vouching for Onesimus to the point where he tells Philemon, his other friend, to receive Onesimus as if he did nothing wrong, just to welcome him right back in and treat him like Paul, the apostle, which is just fascinating to me. And in my life, I think back to the many people where sometimes we could just sit in our grudges and our unforgiveness and just really just letting go of these maybe things that have happened to me and just be willing to receive people back into my life as if they were, Paul, as if they were someone that we would esteem, and view highly. And I even love a few verses later where Paul, it's written in all caps by the publishers for some reason. I don't know exactly why. I'd have to dive deep into that, where he just says, if he has any debt, I will repay it. Wow. I will take this debt on. And I think for my life, like, how could I be that for the people in my life? Mm-hmm. Be that willing to just vouch for them and to be there for them. And for whatever reason, that little letter, I don't know, I just have not been able to shake that. And that was about 4 years ago. And it really has transformed how I view my relationships, ministry. I don't really know. It's kind of odd.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And that's affected even how you look at youth ministry.
Oh, yeah.
And our young people today.
Yeah. So anytime that we really believe in a culture of just appreciation, of just really celebration is what we like to call it with Compelled Youth. That we don't look at an accomplishment of a student as being the reason why we celebrate those, but just the fact that a student is with us, we celebrate. And so we really embrace just funny, odd kids from our athletes. It doesn't matter. Like, we just want to create and receive them as if they were top of the line, right? Just had everything going for them. It doesn't matter. Where others see problems, we see potential, as a good coach has done in my life. And so that's our heart. And so we want to receive everyone as if, we were receiving Christ himself. And so it's definitely influenced how I view ministry and how I do ministry.
So I was the youth pastor 28 years ago. I'd like to say I was fairly good at it.
Yeah.
But kids didn't have phones.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a World Wide Web. Nobody had a laptop. Nobody had an iPad. Only the richer kids had cable. People didn't eat out all the time. It was a special event. And I youth pastored in the culture where the smallest of things and efforts created like a lot of talk. There weren't travel clubs like there is now.
Yeah.
There wasn't the entertainment age. There were nobody had, like, I had a Sega, but nobody had an Xbox. Yeah, just playing Mortal Kombat and Madden all day long.
Good times.
But what are the biggest challenges in the culture today with all these other complicated and complex dynamics that a young person, 12 and 13, are dealing with that they didn't deal with 30 years ago, that I didn't deal with 45 years ago in Morenci, Michigan? To youth pastor youth today, what are some of the things that have made it an incredible challenge for youth to really see Christ in their life?
Man, we cannot escape the game of comparison anymore. It's at our fingertips. And I think even back when I was a junior high or high schooler, I was given some separation. In school, yes, you'd face it. You would see your classmates and maybe you would compare yourself to them. But now at their fingertips, they have a whole, World Wide Web they can compare their lives to,
right,
from what they, from what they're wearing, from what they're going to do with their lives, how much influence this person has online, to all these things. And that's not even really getting into just the temptation that is right at their fingertips every waking moment through pornography and all the things that they have access to that even when I was growing up, we had to seek access to.
Right.
We had to, I'm old enough where we had dial-up internet. And so it was very obvious when you were using the internet at our house because you would hear the modem, which was the loudest thing in the world.
Right.
And it's just really heartbreaking because not only are you seeing the effects of sin, but you're also seeing just what it does to somebody's just mental health when they're in this constant stage of comparing themselves to other people. They're seeing the best in the world all of the time at something and then feeling less than themselves because they're not up to that standard.
Yeah.
And so that is a massive challenge that not only do they face, but I think our whole generation that is currently living faces on this earth, where we maybe weren't always in this cycle of comparison, but now it's just there. It's just something that we are trying to navigate. And
so the messages young people are living with, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I'm not significant. I'm not valued. Somebody's already better, prettier, more athletic, greater friends online, funnier.
It's all there. Take, really make your pick on what thing you want to, match your life up to and just feel less than. And like obviously the message of Christ is completely opposite of that.
Right.
He states we're enough for him by just his act on the cross, and he sees us as a joy. And I think that message really does resonate, but of course it's getting more difficult to deliver that message because it's hard to have people come to us. So it creates, I think, it's a problem, which is good, and it's making us think about ways to go to them. And so how can we get in their world and be that voice of truth? Because as the days and years go by, just creating an event and hoping kids show up, it doesn't work like that anymore. We have to get more creative in how we're delivering that truth. And I think a lot of that comes to just discipling our students well and making sure that they're healthy, so that we can come alongside them and their families to be that just light in the world that they all inhabit, to be really the salt of the earth, like that we want for our lives. How am I making this place preserved, but also safer? How am I being that voice?
Right. How do you guys in your youth team, and I know you have like 25 leaders with you and your wife, Michelle, how do you guys address the busyness of the average teenager, the unbelievable amount of opportunities they have from robotics, My kids were wrestlers. I was a wrestler. That starts in 5th grade. You can wrestle all summer long.
Yeah.
You can travel to tournaments every week. After the GLWC, you got Team Relentless, you got open tournaments, you got freestyle, you got Greco-Roman. Add that to all year long soccer, all year long everything, robotics, clubs. They also have no reason to even leave their houses. They have so many cool online games and I mean, how do you compete? I don't know if competing is a bad word. How do you convince children or even parents who think their kids are all going to be pro athletes?
Yeah.
That's hardly ever going to happen.
Is that another podcast?
That's not what's that?
Is that another podcast in the works?
Yeah. Your kid ain't going to be a pro athlete, so stop. Okay, they're not going to feed their family playing soccer. So how do you lift up that Christ is important? Your kids' spiritual lives are more important than their athletic lives. The colleges that they're trying to joggle to get into and getting a good job, and so they'll make good money. And sometimes, not all, but sometimes this is at the expense of their spiritual life.
Yeah.
Well, what do you do to like not get frustrated? I get frustrated at that. I'm not even the youth pastor.
Yeah. So I will say it is, it can be frustrating for sure when you kind of see that routine. And so the way that we train our leaders and the way that I live that out the best I can is, the first thing is we will receive a student. If we see them, it's never about, wow, where have you been? That's never the focus. It's, hey, we're so glad you're here. It's just celebrating them with them in those things they're doing and trying to be supportive in those things as well. And then, there are obviously times when students are out of pocket due to these things. And so the approach that we have tried to take as much as possible is, also encourage them to be bold and courageous and take steps in making space for our community, the youth ministry.
Right.
But also if they are in season and it becomes impossible, man, that has to become your missions field. That has to become the thing that, you're reflecting Christ in. And so we try to resource them as well, especially for our students who are kind of out of pocket due to some of those commitments. But yeah, my challenge always to a lot of those families is really, man, we've seen students come before, and we have students currently who are involved in all those things, but are still with us on a weekly basis. And so they make that commitment. I understand it's difficult, but what I think can happen is the more that we maybe allow some of these things to get in the way, it becomes almost another reason why we're not taking steps into that community, into our community. And then there is distance there, and it could be difficult for them to enter back in because they do feel disconnected. But we've seen students involved in all those things who are still coming as much as they can. And there are times they're out of town, of course, that happens. But it's always a life-giving community when we make effort and put ourselves there. But we also realize that, man, due to the stats and due to just church attendance, sometimes you're only going to get a student once every 2 months. And so as a team, man, we're going to love them, hear them, remind them that, they matter in the time that we have them. And so we definitely make a note when we're with them. And if we ever see someone outside the community, they're all coached to just celebrate the fact that you're having a conversation with them right then and not make it about attendance. Yes. Just be like, hey, man, we're for you. How's that thing going that might be pulling them out? And just try to be their pastor, be their youth leader, and just awesome. Be there for them.
What a great perspective. What a great attitude. I know that when the boys were in wrestling, it can be done. It made our lives crazy for sometimes, but it can be done.
I mean, we have some pulling in, like they had to meet the team for track, and we had a student, Aiden Ortiz, great guy. I love that guy.
Incredible.
Shows up all sweaty. It's
just made it.
Just made it. But it's just like that heart. Yeah. He sees it as a priority, and that's awesome. Like, and I love that. We have so many students like that who are doing that consistently. And then there are students who are out, man, we love them too. And we love to see, God use them in those athletics, through robotics, through theater and plays. It's such an uplift to me and Michelle to be able to go to a play and have 10 kids in it and just know that, man, those 10 kids are solid, and the life that was given to all those practices and rehearsals because Christ was present.
Yeah, you celebrate that.
Yeah.
Not condemn that. Well, yeah, that's awesome. It's a great way. Well, we got just a couple minutes. What's your dream for the youth ministry? Do you got a dream for your youth ministry at Compelled Church? We live in the dream.
We live in the dream. But yes, but also just to continually become a community and an environment where we aren't swaying or shying away from topics or conversations, but rather really looking to how we can be Jesus in those conversations and approach every difficult moment with a student with that heartbeat and attitude. And so the more that we create that, not only in our building, but that leaves the building with our students and our leaders and myself, I mean, that's what we're trying to create and just be that for our community.
You and Michelle are such an incredible blessing, and I love your level of passion for students, your passion for the Lord, of course, and your maturity to really take students deeper, and really you do everything you say. Value each and every student and celebrate them. So thanks, Pastor Dustin.
Oh, thank you, Pastor Nate.
Incredible.
It was a blessing to be here.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to Live Compelled, and make sure you subscribe. Maybe you want to share this with somebody. I think you should. That would be great. So this is Nate Ellerton and Dusty Reed, and keep living for Jesus and keep living compelled.